What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to Comics Kings. This is Brandon. I'm super excited for today's episode of Creators Corner. I was actually looking earlier today at the past Creators Corner episodes. We're at officially 1 year of this show. So, Mark Waid, it is great to see you again. We have met at Baltimore a few times, and thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Sure, doing well today. And you?
I am. It has been a day. It has been a day, new job and everything. But we're here. I'm ready to talk about World's Finest with you among your past works.
Sure.
So what inspired your return to DC?
What inspired my return to DC was a change in management, and the moment the management changed, I got 4 calls from different editors, 2 of them before lunch. So that was it. I've been knocking on the door for a while, but it's nice to be let back in the house.
Right, because I really enjoyed your past DC work, like Tower of the Babel, right? That was one of my favorite Justice League stories. I really enjoyed Kingdom Come. I really enjoyed your Superman as well. So I was really excited to see the headline that Mark Waid's returning, because you're actually one of my favorite writers. Probably, if I were to actually go through my entire all my comics, I think I would have yours would be number 1.
Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
Or Bendis. Was there an editor in particular that you had a better rapport with, or you had the most rapport with?
I mean, over the course of my career, certainly Tom Brevoort over at Marvel, I've always had a good rapport with. Nick Lowe, who does the Spider-Man books. There's no editors that I don't get along with, which I think is an important part of the job. But, Joey Cavalieri and I had a good relationship. Now, currently, Paul Kaminsky and his assistant Dave, and whose last name I still can't pronounce, even though he's my assistant editor, that's a good relationship, and it's been a very fulfilling job so far.
Right, that's really interesting, because a lot of times, as on our end of it, we don't really look at the relationship between the writer and the editor. If you could speak on that for us, that would be really insightful.
It makes an enormous amount of difference. A good editor knows that their job is to help you tell your story, not make you tell their story. And I've had a few editors over the years who have not paid attention to that rule and have sort of come back, and they'll read the script and they'll go, okay, this is good, but maybe we could put a big scene in here with this as well. I'm like, where are you going to put it? We have 22 pages. Where are you going to put this thing? Or saying, well, I think it would be funnier if the character said this. I'm like, guys, that's subjective. And, if you really want to change it, we'll change it, but I don't think so. I don't think I've ever gotten tooth and nail in a fight with an editor. I certainly haven't. At the end of the day, it's their job to protect the IP, right? It's their job to protect the characters. And I respect that enormously.
Right. And that's also a great point that you mentioned, is there has to be a balance, right? A trust between the editor and the writer. How would you say that trust has changed? Has it changed over the years? Because I know you started, right? DC Flash was your first project, right? Or was there another one?
Yeah. No, that was the first big one. That was the first regular ongoing assignment. I don't think it's changed that much. I think that if anything has changed, and I've seen this with some editors, luckily not the ones I'm working with, but with some editors, I feel kind of bad for them because there's not the institutional memory that there was before. So it's not like you can be an assistant for 4 or 5 years and learn all the tricks of the trade and then sort of be promoted up, because you're being taught by people who didn't get a chance to learn some of the dark art stuff, not the obvious stuff, but the dark art stuff, because they were hired and trained by people who weren't, didn't know Julie Schwartz, didn't know Robert Kanigher, didn't know Marie Boltinoff, didn't know the great DC editors of the past who really knew how to sell a comic and how to do it well.
Right. Dick Giordano was a great editor.
Dick was a great example. Carlin, Mike Carlin. I think that, and again, this is in no way to denigrate current editors. I'm just saying, it's not that I think they're doing a bad job. It's I wish that they had, and I'm sure they do too, I wish they had a chance to really have that level of experience with those titans,
Right. And you did, which is why I wanted to see where that was, because that was really interesting. So You've done a lot of Pride. You've probably written every character. I don't think there's a character that I have not seen you write. Probably Conan. If I were to think one, I think Conan.
Conan's probably it. That's a very short list. Yeah.
It's a short list. So why did you want to come back and do World's Finest, right? Because that title has not been around for years. What made you want to come back and bring that back to life?
It's the dream project. It is, there have been Superman, Batman books, over the past several years, past couple of decades, but to be able to do it with a slightly different approach, where DC just said, do what you want to do.
That's awesome.
And their mandate was, look, rather than try to make it tie in with current continuity because it's changing all the time, and if you did that, then Superman wouldn't even be in the book for the next 6 months because he's on War World and so forth. So just pick a time in the past, an indeterminate time in the past, and write the classic versions of the characters is what I was told. Like write the bread and butter,
Right.
Here's Batman with a bat cave, and here's Jim Gordon, and here's Alfred, and here's Superman, and he's got a secret identity, and Lois doesn't know it, and they're not married, and so really the characters as most casual readers, or not hardcore fans, but most people know the characters in this version. So yeah.
Right. So the whole goal of this book is to invite newer readers to these characters, because we have probably the most Batman books, I would say, than we have ever seen, especially in my comic reading. So this was a really refreshing take for me on Bruce Wayne's character. It was great seeing Alfred back. Like when I saw Alfred back, I think I stood up and jumped up and down 5 times, What would you say is the biggest thrill of this, other than just writing the classic characters? The way that they were let's throw continuity out the window.
I mean, that is the thrill. That's the single biggest thrill, is just being able to get in there and write not just Superman, who I know intimately, but Batman, who I know pretty well too. And then the fun of it to me is making a point. Actually, this is a pretty big thrill too, is making a point of showing you character combinations that you've never seen before. The reason the Doom Patrol's in the first arc is mostly because we've never seen Superman and Batman have an adventure with the Doom Patrol ever.
Right.
So let's see that. In issue 2, Supergirl and Robin have a conversation Dick Grayson have a conversation for the first time I can ever recall. I've never seen them have a conversation in 80 years of comics. So what is their relationship like? And that's the fun of playing with it. So as we go forward, this arc ends with issue 5. And then as we go forward with the next arc, my goal is going to be, okay, here's something you've never seen before. I really want that to be in every issue. Here's something you've never seen before.
So what is another thing that, other than Supergirl and Robin, that you've never seen before?
I say this almost half jokingly, but I really do want to see the Bizarro Man-Bat team.
Yes. I like Bizarro. I remember there was an issue of the red, white, and blue where it was Bizarro's birthday. Michael Conrad wrote it. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was the best love letter. He's a good friend. So
yeah.
I always like seeing Bizarro. I always love seeing niche DC characters. Now, full transparency, I'm a much bigger Marvel head, right? So your Daredevil, your Fantastic Four is like this. I can recall almost every issue. DC characters, they kind of get lost in continuity. What is your stance on continuity, but also how familiar we have to keep these characters in the pages?
They're two different things. To me, continuity is different than consistency, right? Continuity is Superman's on War World this month, and he's met, the Authority for the first time a year ago, and you've got to keep all this stuff in mind as you're writing your current story. That's continuity. Consistency is more like The Simpsons, right? Or it's Bart's always going to be 8 years old, or 10 years old. Liz is always going to be 8. Homer's always going to be looking for a different gig. It's the characters are consistent, even though there's no real continuity between each of the episodes. They could pretty much happen out of order by and large. So consistency, continuity is important, and I love the world building that DC has done over the last 80 years, but we've also monkeyed around so much with continuity, and used it when it's important, and not used it when it's not important. And continuity is kind of a mess at DC right now, and I'm kind of okay with it, because I don't know how you put that toothpaste back in the tube except to make everybody right. Again, 85 Batman books every month. Can you imagine if they all had to be tied together with exactly what was happening in all the other 84 Batman books? I don't think you could do it.
Right. Or like you can have like mini series of, okay, this one. Well, the thing about like DC's Omniverse right now is they can tell stories like, okay, this one might be on a different Earth, or you could be reading a different Earth Batman, right? Or you can be doing this X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's tricky because you don't want to give the readers an excuse to not read it because they think, oh, this isn't important.
Right.
Whereas this is definitely going to be a part of the mainstream DC continuity because we are setting up with this arc the next big thing that I'm going to be doing at DC that'll be set in the present day. So it's with a purpose. And the next arc of World's Finest we're going to do is planned to have, even though it's set in the past, planned to have some sort of ramifications that you'll see in modern DC Comics, because that's tying those two together allows me both. It allows me to be able to play with continuity as it exists, but it also allows me to go free range with
that. Your own way in like DC right now, right? Or you're loosely attached to continuity, but there's also like that little head nod to like, if readers are following your work, which they absolutely should. If you're not, then just do it anyway. But it allows you to have that freedom. Do you think like a lot of other titles suffer from that, of playing too much in continuity?
I think so. I mean, the thing is, if you're a writer at DC or Marvel, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, and this is what you signed up for. So, if you're not going to play in continuity, your editor had better have your back, because and there's a lot to be said for playing in continuity, especially if, again, the great thing about writing something like the Batman books right now, even though they're not all tied together that tightly, they're still tied together pretty tightly. And what that gives is the opportunity for writer Chip Zdarsky to sit down with writer Josh Williamson and sit down with, whoever, Ram V or who else is doing these books, and have those conversations and have those meetings and have those sort of like miniature writer summits and spark ideas off each other. And that's always fun too. I mean, the advantage of writing something in continuity when you're writing the same character that other people are writing is, if you're lucky, y'all get together in the same room, or you get together on the same Zoom, and you just start talking about the story, and then ideas just spark. Ideas just happen, because when you put writers together in a room, you're going to get more than the sum of your parts.
Right. And at the end of the day, you guys are all fans of the characters, right? I mean, obviously, because you're in the profession. Right. So it's almost like you go to the comics and you're like, hey, you know what would be so cool?
Yeah.
Another Hawkman book, right? Or
exactly.
Right?
Or whatever. Yeah.
Or a JSA book. Is that going to be your next project, by the way? I would love that.
I don't think so. It's been offered, but I know that Jeff Johns has his eye on those characters, and I don't know what that means either. He may not do. It's not a scoop. He may not do JSA either, but I would like to use the JSA in World's Finest, but I don't think I see myself sitting down and writing a JSA book. I could change my mind if some good idea comes along, but that's not on my radar right now.
Right. So you mentioned like how you want to bring up many firsts. How do you go about doing that? Like familiarizing yourself with characters. You probably grew up reading these characters, obviously, like in their state that you're writing them now. But how do you like go back and do your research? If you are doing research, what is your method?
Well, the good news is most of the research is already up here. That's good.
Yes.
So, I mean, I get, like, for instance, I'm doing something in the near future, and it didn't require me to read 75 issues of a specific run of comics that I hadn't read before, but it helped, and I want to just make sure that that's not so much to tie it into 75 issues, is it just to make sure that the characters that as I interpret them are the same as they've been interpreted in those 75 issues, and there's consistency there. But in terms of doing the research about firsts and who has had a scene together, or who's met, who's not met, I mean, I know that stuff basically. And the research of it for me is just going back through a bunch of 80 years of DC history and looking at all the different characters and figuring out which ones I have an affinity for.
Right. And which characters did you say you would relate to the most or want to write the most?
Well, I mean, Superman's at the top of the list, obviously, so, but I love Metamorpho. I love the Metal Men. I love more recent characters like Aztec. I guess it would count as a more recent character, even though it's 20 years old. Tracy 13 is a good character in the Magic universe. I got a take on most of these characters, and especially the ones I read growing up. And so I don't think there's any DC characters from the first 50 or 60 years of that company that I don't love with a passion.
Right. Was there a reason why? Well, obviously, like Dick Grayson first Robin, but why didn't you put in like Jason or tell a story in the centered around the 80s? Like, are we going back to the Silver Age, telling this story?
Not really, because again, it's not really strictly Silver Age continuity, because there's costumes are different, than they would have been back in the day, and there's stuff with the Doom Patrol in here that's not actually technically in Silver Age continuity. So I'm just kind of cherry picking. But Dick Grayson, just because that's the Robin that I love the most. It's not to denigrate other Robins, but that's my favorite Robin. And so the thing about World's Finest is it's not Superman and Batman. It's Superman, Batman, and Robin, and then whoever else. Because Robin plays, Dick Grayson's an equal character in this series, because he's so much fun to write, and because he's the one with a sense of humor. He can crack jokes when Batman and Superman wouldn't. Right, and he's also at this point, he kind of he's. Dick Grayson to me has always been wiser beyond his years, right? Like he may be 15, but he comes off maybe as like he's already a grown adult. Yeah, well, actually, and in this series, I think he's already. It's probably right before the Teen Titans revival with George Perez Marvel, the New Titans, because Dick is in this series like just on the cusp of joining the Titans and becoming Nightwing. So he's older, 17 and change, which is kind of why artist Dan Mora put him in the long pants, which I thought was a really clever idea. I think it was a really good updating of the costume. Oh, Dan Mora is super clever. I love Dan Mora. Once in Future, I would say of all the indie comic books, I would pick Once in Future. Yes, Dan's really good. There's no question about that. And Kieran Gillen, that's just like a power couple right there. Yeah. So Dan, if you're watching, I love the book. Once in Future was a big highlight. So what else? What other upcoming projects did you have? You mentioned you had another book coming out. Are you able to talk about it? Has it been solicited or? That one hasn't. The only thing that I think is an open secret now, even though we've not officially announced it, but Brian Hitch announced it on Twitter like 8 months ago. But he and I are doing a Superman Black Label miniseries, and I'm busy crafting the third of 3 issues today. And this weekend. And I can't say anything about it other than it's essentially a sequel to Superman Birthright, essentially. That's awesome. I love Brian Hitch. His Ultimate is definitely higher on my Marvel list. Yeah. But what else? So we were teased to see like a Green Lantern. We were upcoming issues. Where are we going with World's Finest? You'll see a ton of familiar DC characters in it. Green Lantern's only in it really because the editor said, I really want to see Green Lantern. I'm like, okay, well, we can make that work. Kid Flash and Wonder Girl and Metamorpho are in issue 4 because I like those characters. Yep. So beyond that, I can't really give specifics because the second arc is going to reveal something about the Superman Batman team that we never knew before. But it'll be in continuity. It's just, here's an adventure they had that you never knew about before that has ramifications in their future, has ramifications in current continuity. Right. Who would you say your favorite Green Lantern? I don't think you've ever written Green Lantern other than Kyle Rayner in Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, Babel, sorry. That's all right. I'm trying to think. I'm like, what has Mark not done? Well, they're all good. I like Kyle. I really like Kyle because he's. I like Hal, but Hal's harder to get a handle on because there's not as much nuance to that character. John Stewart's a great version. I've never written John Stewart Green Lantern, and that would be fun. Yes, John Stewart. It's cool.
So DC, obviously, the Round Robin is coming out. The Jon Stewart story actually seems really interesting. I like
Yeah.
Sunsbury, so I'm excited for his take on the character.
Yeah. Yeah.
My other co-host Bryce, he says, "So Mark, can I pay you for the Superman book now?" Or he actually, it's funny because I was recommending your Fantastic Four run because you signed every issue of mine. I don't know if you remember at
Oh yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I was very excited for everyone to read it, and it's been out of print for a while, right? And my friend found the entire run with like give or take a few issues.
Cool.
And I was like, dude, you gotta go back and get issue like 500. You gotta get the last one. And I think he like read it in like 3 days, and it was the most rewarding thing. And Matt Wieringo, I love his art. Rest in peace.
It's great. Yeah.
What was your relationship with him like? I never got the chance to ask you. I know you get asked it a lot, but
it was terrific. I mean, Mike was one of my better friends, and he was just an amazing artist who would draw anything and could draw anything, and he was hungry to learn always. He was always pushing himself. And one of the things I love most about working with Mike is that I would write scenes or write backgrounds or write panels that are insane to draw, like really hard. Like here's an infinite library, or or even just simply saying, Mike, here's a mechanic's garage with all the stuff that a mechanic's garage would have in it, which is pretty complex actually. And rather than turn away from that or do it cheaply, Mike would dive into it. Mike was always eager to draw something that he'd never drawn before. Didn't matter what it was. So
I think what was really cool about Mike's artwork is how you were able to capture emotion. Like, how do you draw someone who's like trying to look confused? Like, how do you like portray that feeling? How do you make feelings on like a 2-dimensional comic book like be conveyed to the reader, right?
Exactly. And that's one of the hardest things to do as a comic book artist, not just because, frankly, drawing characters on model from panel to panel to panel is difficult. It's not, that's a learned skill in comics, is one of the things you learn later as a penciler. Right. But then beyond that, to be able to do them on model and, like you said, have a full range of emotion in the face, that is not something that a lot of guys can really do. And so, and Mike was certainly one of them. Dan's another one.
Dan is fantastic. I think Dan has that great mix of almost like not anime style, but it's not really like your typical comic book, like not like someone like Dan Jurgens, who's fantastic. I only know that because I'm looking at a Booster Gold comic book literally standing right next to me. But it's like, it's super clean. It's very much like, it's like traditional, right? Dan Mora has like that nice balance, but it's so unique to him. His lines are fantastic.
Yeah.
Mike, the issue that stood out to me was the whole Doom and Valeria cover, right? Where she was just like Doom with the letters, with the little, can you talk about their relationship a little bit? Because I know that's a little hard to explain, especially like for me.
You mean the Doom Valeria relationship?
Yes.
It's funny you should ask, because how do I say this without giving too much away? There is a Marvel project that I'm involved with that is probably about a year out, but it's not a comic.
Graphic novel?
No, it's not for print. And I can't say anything more than that, other than it really forced me to because Valeria and Doom are the two main characters. So looking at those characters and figuring out what their relationship is. I mean, Doom really does think of her as a relative. He really does think of her as a niece. And Valeria admires the fact that, I mean, she knows Doom is a horrible human being, but there's something about the fact that he's so smart, and he's one of the few people on Earth that can keep up with her, like her dad, that, it makes him a little less repugnant. I think that Valeria's relationship with Doom is that she thinks she's arrogant enough to think she can play him. And to some degree she can, but by and large, not so much. But I think she thinks she can. Right.
And that's kind of the essence of Reed and Doom's relationship. It's like they're trying to compete with each other, but Doom kind of decided, let me get into some magic stuff and then come back to this, right? And then and it's really interesting because the wedding of Doom got, well, just happened, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was honestly one of my favorite issues of Fantastic Four in a while, mostly because of Namor's reaction. I don't know if you've read the issue, but Namor
Yeah. It's really good.
busting out laughing was a huge highlight of mine. But it was like almost a lot of the same relationships from your run was like translated. It has been translated in Dan Slott, so like I've been really enjoying it for that.
Yeah, me too.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Plus, like Namor appearances being cocky to Doom is always appropriate, and Johnny undermining him is, you know, what's your perspective on Doom as a villain, as a character?
Oh, I wrote about this in great length in one of the hardcovers. So basically, I did a manifesto, and I can sum it up in one sentence, which is that Doom would tear the head off a newborn infant and eat it like an apple if it somehow proved that he was smarter than Reed Richards. That's all that Doom wants to do, is prove that he is smarter than Reed Richards. He says he is noble. He says he is regal. He says, you know, he does think of himself as noble.
Right.
He's not noble in the least. I mean, that's something he tells himself, and he tells himself enough that some readers buy it and some writers buy it. But frankly, this is a guy who will knife you in the back at any given moment. So don't give me the whole, oh, he's a man of his word. He's not. No, he's not. He's a man of his word when he wants to be a man of his word, but he is, you can't trust him.
Right. And that's why in the new Strange series, it was so cool to like see Clea kind of sass him a little bit when he wanted to be Sword Supreme. He's like, well, because I'm the only magic guy left on Earth. You're like, no, I'm married to him. I'm sorry, Chief. Like, get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
exactly.
Let's switch it back to World's Finest. Do you see the same qualities as Doom trying to outdo Reed Richards all the time, similar to how Lex Luthor treats Superman?
That's tougher. That's a way more nuanced relationship. I think that there is something to, I think Luthor is a character, is my favorite villain. And I think that he's a character with a million different sides to him. So it's not as simple as Luthor hates Superman because of this one thing. Superman makes him feel small. That's part of it. But I don't think that's all of it. I think there's also something to the idea that, what am I trying to say? I mean, that I like, again, there's different versions of Luthor. My personal favorite version of Luthor is the one that actually spent some time in Smallville as a kid. And not a long time, but enough to sort of kind of make friends with Clark as much as he can, as much as he's capable of making friends with anybody. I mean, the thing about Luthor is he is so intelligent that his brain just doesn't have room for emotional maturity or emotional intelligence. It's all intellectual. It literally doesn't have the room and the capacity for emotional intelligence. So as a kid, you know, him and Clark hanging out for a couple of months, I like, because Luthor could see in him somebody who could sort of keep up with him, and
it grounds him a little bit.
Yeah, where nobody else in Smallville could possibly keep up with Luthor, but this Kent kid kind of could. And so I think that he sees Superman again as somebody who can't keep up with him, and he sort of resents that, because he would like to have somebody in his life who could really keep up with him, and so he's very smug and arrogant about that. But I also think he's deep down, he's a pretty lonely character. He's an insanely lonely character.
Right. And I think that almost builds up in his insecurities to bring on the Legion of Doom and do all of that stuff. Is that something that because I know Long Day, Lex. I know Lex appeared in World's Finest. Is he going to keep appearing?
I think so. I think I've got I mean, I don't have any concrete plans, but I wouldn't be surprised, because I like Batman versus Luthor. You know, I like Superman. I like Superman versus the Riddler. I like these idea that, you know, characters that you don't normally see go up against each other. Superman Riddler actually would be a pretty stupid fight, but and I don't want to say Superman versus Joker, but there's something there, because, as I said in World's Finest #1, one of the big differences between Batman and Superman is that Superman is literally incapable of thinking like a villain. So he's not like Superman can beat General Zod. Superman would have a much harder time with a serial killer, just because this is not a head he can get into, right? This is not a point of view he could even remotely understand. Whereas with most of his villains, he can at least understand where they're coming from, if not agree. Certainly don't agree, but understand. He even understands. He understands Luthor. He understands Brainiac. He understands, Parasite. But no one understands the Joker. Batman does, and nobody else does. He's not. Superman's not capable of it.
Right, because Batman can kind of walk that line of I can be Joker. It's like there's only one thing, right? Really one difference. The cool thing about Gotham to me is how it turns everyone into like their own creature. When we all like have like a dark corner in our life. Like you go through life, not everything's gonna be like all sunshine and roses, like Sylvester Stallone says in Rocky, but what's cool about Gotham is it brings out the worst and the best in you. So all of the villains, right? What I really liked about the Gotham show is I could almost say, hey, I could understand this villain. And I think that's what the Batman movie, if anyone didn't see it, you can follow the main villain in the movie and almost you can be like they were justified, right?
Or at least understand. I mean, you don't have to. There's different. You don't have to condone someone's behavior in order to, but by understanding it, they're two different things. So
right, like not condoning it, but you can like follow their thought process, right? And I think that's what makes Batman's villains the best rogues gallery in comics.
Yeah,
let me see.
Probably so.
Let me double check myself. Yeah, probably the best.
I think so. Yep.
Fantastic Four would probably be number 2.
Maybe.
You got Super Skrull, Doom, Galactus. That's a good hat trick. Let's talk about Daredevil for a second, because that was a really cool story. You had a lot of talented artists: Marcus Martin, Rivera, first name Paulo Rivera, and then Chris Samney, who's kicking butt on Firepower right now. What was it was different, right? You look at Frank Miller's, you look at Bendis's, they almost like coherently follow each other. Zdarsky's is following that. Soule's blended in a little bit of both worlds. Yours was a little bit different. So what was your approach to Daredevil's character? And he's my favorite character. So
that's cool. I've always loved Daredevil, but I've never been interested in writing Daredevil because he's such a, they've always treated him, since Frank Miller's come along, they've always treated him as such a dark, grim, harried character. And I get that. And that's a valid interpretation. So when Marvel asked, Steve Wacker was my editor, and when he asked me to take on Daredevil, he said, pointedly, just as a change of pace, we'd like to make it a little bit more of a superhero book as opposed to a crime book and just see how that goes. And I said, okay, if you'll let me do that, then I'm playing in my wheelhouse. I have no interest in writing the grim, dark Daredevil, not because I don't think grim, dark is fun to write, and it is with the right characters, but writing grim, dark Daredevil means you're competing with Frank Miller, Brian Bendis, Ed Brubaker. So I'm not going to be as good at this. I'm not going to be as good as Frank Miller at writing that version of Daredevil. So why would I even try? Let me write a version of Daredevil that I can understand and that makes sense to me, and gives the illusion of being a smiling, swashbuckling character, but really, if you read the comics, is really not.
Right. It was like Daredevil's happy, but then everything's gonna make a full 180.
Right. He's not happy. He's not. We say in issue 1, he's not happy. He says, I'm so far down. I've dug so far down that I just have to fake it until I make it. If I don't, I'll die. If I don't if I don't find happiness, I'm gonna die. He says this in issue 1, and he says, and as part of that, you kind of have to fake it till you make it, and put on a happy face and see if that will help. And it helps some, but as you get into my run and the depression of that character really comes to the fore, I think it's pretty clear that I think casual people who haven't read it look at it and go, oh, Chris Samney is, sort of cartoony as opposed to Jim. He's not Jim Lee. So therefore the comic must be fun and wacky, and it's nothing like that. There's fun in it,
right?
And there's humor in it, but there's also some there's a whole closet full of disembodied heads. I mean, there's a lot of dark stuff in it.
Oh yeah, if you think Sammy's a fun, I read Firepower. That's like
it's really good.
It's like same thing, right? Matt Wilson colors, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
What's really cool about that, like you mentioned, is depression, because that's the real theme of Daredevil's character. It is depression, right? He's alone a lot, right? When he's not with a girl, he's basically alone, right?
Right.
What am I trying to say? Matt Murdock as a character has always been interesting. It was like, I kind of compare it to Tom King's run as Batman, and in a really good way, because it focused on, well, let's give this character an identity without just the mask, right? How can they react to situations as a regular human, right? And we have not really seen Daredevil, a focused Daredevil story, or a Matt Murdock story, right?
Matt Murdock story, right?
Right. We're used to seeing him, like, I think the most depressing issue with Daredevil in like that gritty was Daredevil 164, where he was retelling his origin to Ben Urich in the hospital. Right. That was actually the first Daredevil comic I ever read, and it's still the one that I always go back to. But it's what's your take on the character? Like, if you were to look at his depression now during your run, outside of, like, do you think he can live a happy life not being Daredevil?
No, I don't think he can. I think that Daredevil is an outlet for him that he doesn't have otherwise. I think that he can be content in moments from time to time, but it's just, it drives him. I mean, what drives Matt Murdock, I think, is that something so horribly unfair happened to him when he was a kid. How unfair is that he tried to help a blind man across the street, and in retribution, the universe blinded him. And I think on some level, Matt looks at that and is driven to try to make things fair for other people, and try to make life fair, try to make the world fair, and make a world make sense. And so that's why he's a lawyer, and that's what motivates him, I think, is Daredevil. Is he's looking to, whether he realizes it or not, he's going out there to try to make the world make sense and be fair and be better for people, because it was so horrible to him when he was a boy.
Right, and that's also his faith too, is doing unto others as they would do unto you, right? He saved a man's life, he's paying for it, but he also, like, when he first became Daredevil, he was a very dark creature.
Yeah,
right? He was darker, and I feel like he's trying to atone for that sin.
Right. You can't do much Daredevil without really focusing on the fact that he's one of the very few openly, practicing religion, practicing Catholicism characters in all of comics. I didn't touch on it as much, only because I personally am not a particularly spiritual man. I'm not a churchgoer. I respect people who are, but it wasn't me. So it wasn't a world that I was as familiar with, but boy, am I familiar with a world of depression. So that, that way could work in.
Right. Now, I know I asked you this at Baltimore, and when I did, you responded and you said, I would like to do a book of Neil Adams, but I can't really talk about it, right? I was at Baltimore, and it came out to be a very nice Treasury Edition book that is sitting right across from me right now.
Cool.
Right? And I loved it, right? Neil Adams is great. That Fantastic Four and this is great. So who is another artist that you would like to work with that you have not already?
Wow, that is a great question. There's a lot of up-and-comers that I think are really stunning. I'm Bruno.
Redondo.
Who does Daredevil? Nightwing. Yeah, same thing.
Daredevil.
Same thing in a way. I think he's great. I think that Elsa Charteret she's awesome. I think that there's a lot of them out there.
There's a lot of young talent out there right now.
I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with the Titans, right? The George Perez's, the Walt Simonsons, the Neil Adams, of that generation. I think I've been able to work with all of them that I want to work with, Dave Gibbons or whatever. But I think that what I'm doing now is paying a lot of attention to, what's out there that I really love now, and can I work? My sights are not set just on, the older guard, because I've been able to work with those people. I want to work with the younger guard. I want to work with the people who weren't around when I started reading comics.
Right, and I've been going through, like, my Omnibuy, like, or a lot of older early 2000, maybe like 2012, 2013, and it's like seeing like Juan Cabal, Iban Coelho, Pepe Larraz, Mohamed Aswar, seeing those guys, right, in those books like Wolverine and the X-Men, right? I'm like, oh, now look where you are. You are at the top of your profession right now. And I think that is a big compliment to Marvel. Or even like Bruno Redondo and Tom Taylor got their relationship started writing Darth Maul for Dark Horse, a 5-issue miniseries.
Right.
Right. So for me, that is always interesting to see, like, where do these creative teams develop, you know?
Yeah.
First off, you and Mike with Flash, correct? With Bart Allen.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts of the state of Young Justice right now? Because I know that's coming out soon. And this will probably be the last question because I know you're pressed.
That's all right. And I don't have a really good answer. I don't know. I mean, it's fluid because I know Josh Williamson has brought Impulse back, and I'm grateful that he has, Bart Allen.
Yeah, man.
But I don't know how his origin works in current continuity, and I'm sure that Josh has a plan, and I'm eager to hear it. But I'm not quite sure what you do with Connor Kent now that John Kent's around. So I don't know who's going to run with that baton, but
right.
I'm very interested to see what they do.
Right, or that John is also because you have the new Justice League team, which could be Teen Titans.
Yeah, but I'm really eager to see what comes of that.
Right. But anyway, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight to Creators Corner. Again, I'm so sorry I was late. I just started a new job. And it was like, for some reason, this was the first 12-hour plus shift they had me work. I was like, what the heck? Come on. Y'all know I got something to do. But Mark, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It was an absolute honor to have you.
No, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. And thank you guys to the chat. If you guys are catching this on the rewind, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel for more announcements. We do have a little bit of a schedule change. Everything is going on right now, so stay tuned for that. Follow on Instagram. Link is in the description below. So remarks, you guys can stay up to date on everything. Take care, you guys. And thank you guys all for spending your Friday night. Have a great holiday this weekend. Thank you guys so much. Take care, guys.
Take care.